Welcome to G-Man Gaming and Reviews. Alright, we're going to continue on with our guide to the characters of Sentinels of the Multiverse. Now, in the previous guide, we did Legacy. So we'll stick with the, I think I normally organize them by difficulty, so we'll stick with the level 1 the difficulty 1 characters first, and then we'll move on to the difficulty 2 and difficulty 3. That just means that difficulty 1 means they're easier to use, difficulty 2 is intermediate, and difficulty 3 means they're more complicated. Alright, so if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, please give me 5. If it's on iTunes, give me 5 stars if you want to. But yeah, and please subscribe to the podcast. All right, so we're going to do Haka. Now, as for his base ability, there will be a separate section on variants. So the way that I do this is I do a part 1, which is where I go through the base variant and all the cards and how to use them. Part 2 it will be a playthrough using Haka, and part 3 will be talk on the variants as well as where he fits into the team and some other ideas to fit him into teams, like who he really meshes with. Now, the base variant, the power is Crush, which essentially he deals 2 melee damage. So Haka is essentially a damage dealer, and he's essentially a damage dealer, but he has abilities he can heal himself. He's got these Hakas, he's got 3 Hakas essentially. One that heals him, one that shields him from next damage, and one that allows him to do more damage, right? So essentially Haka does damage. That's what he basically does. He's a damage dealer, right? But because because of the way that he works, he can heal himself. So he's a little bit more versatile in what he can do for himself, but he's very self-contained. In other words, he doesn't really interact with the team very much, except for if you're talking about one of his variants, which I'll get in later. He's very self-contained. So he either does damage, or he heals himself, or he makes himself more difficult to damage, or he increases his damage. So I'll go through the cards, and then you'll sort of get a sense of what I'm talking about. So the first card is called Dominion. It's an ongoing card, and it's not limited, which means you can have multiple copies of this on play, and you should. So essentially what it does is, whenever an environment card is destroyed, you may draw a card. Now, he's got 3 copies of this in his deck, and you want all 3 of them in play. The reason is that a lot of his Hakas, which are his abilities to heal, do more damage, and whatever, they rely on discarding cards, right? The more cards you discard, the greater the effect. So he wants to be drawing a lot of cards on a regular basis, right? So if you have 1 copy of Dominion in play, right? Whenever an environment card is destroyed, he draws an extra card. If you have 2, he draws an extra 2 cards. And if you have 3, he draws an extra 3 cards. Now, if he's destroying multiple environment cards a turn, or if other people are helping to destroy environment cards, he's just going to get more cards. So, very important card to have in play is Dominion. It's an ongoing, and remember, it's not limited, so you can have as many copies as he has in the deck, up to a maximum of 3 in play. Now, the next card is Elbow Smash. This is a 1-shot, and it deals 3 melee damage. So, it's essentially deals 3 damage, 3 melee damage. So, it basically helps him do more damage. Alright, the next card is Enduring Intercession. And it's an ongoing card, and this is pretty much the only way that Haka can sort of interact with the rest of the team, in that it allows it. So basically, what it says is it's an ongoing, and it's redirect any damage that would be dealt to a hero target by an environment card to Haka. So it essentially allows him to tank damage from environment cards. Now, this can be very useful if you're playing with Legacy, because then you can use Legacy to tank damage from villain targets, and you can use Haka to tank damage from the environment. Now, Haka doesn't have many cards to reduce damage, but because he's got his Haka of Restoration and he can heal, it does help him tank. But this is probably the only card that he has that pretty much interacts with the rest of the team, that actually provides aid to the rest of the team. Now, the next card is an ongoing, but it only lasts until the end of his next turn. Now, it's called Ground Pound. Now, this is a very, very good card. It can basically give you a turn. I'll say what it does first. So, when this card enters play, either discard 2 cards or destroy this card. Non-hero cards cannot deal damage. That means not just villain cards, but the environment. So, if you're playing against certain characters, certain villains that tend to have a lot of targets in play, especially at the start of their turn, at the start of the game, and you've got this card in hand, you might just play this just to get like a turn where you can't be damaged. Very, very good card. But yeah, it only lasts until the end of your next turn. There are some interactions with this card because it's an ongoing. Any characters that have the ability to bring back ongoing cards or back cards from the trash means that you can use this for multiple turns. But you've got to discard 2 cards every time you play it. So that's pretty much his other card that provides team support. It's a very, very good card. So, like I said, when you play it, non-hero cards can't do damage. Very, very powerful. Now, his next one is one of the Hakas, the first Haka, it's called the Haka of Battle. And, oh, wait, I need to go back for a second. So the previous card that was the one that stops people from dealing damage is called Ground Pound. I just to make sure that I said the title. So it's Ground Pound. That's the name of the card. Now, the next one is Haka of Battle. Now, it's a one-shot. Now, you draw 2 cards, and then you discard 1 or more cards. And then you increase the next damage dealt by a Haka by 1 for each card discarded this way. So this card, so you draw 2 cards. Now, you can use it in one of 2 ways. You can either use it to just draw another card if you've got nothing else, and hopefully you get, or you can use it to deal more damage. So essentially the way it works, this is what Haka's mechanics are all about discarding cards. Which means he likes things that help him get cards into his hand, which is why the Dominion ability that I was talking about, the Dominion card that I was talking about before, is very, very useful for him. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Draw 2 cards and discard 1 or more cards. Increase the next damage dealt by Haka by 1 for each card he discards. So essentially it allows him to do 1 turn of mega damage depending on how many cards you discard. The next one is my personal favorite, Haka of Restoration. So it's a one-shot. Draw 2 cards and discard 1 or more cards. Haka regains HP equal to the number of cards discarded this way. It essentially allows him to heal, which in this game is very, very useful, especially for a tank like him. Now, the base variant starts with 34 health, which is massive. So he's got a lot of health at the beginning. Yeah, so that's essentially that Haka, so it allows him to heal. The last Haka is the Haka of Shielding, right? It's a one-shot, like the rest of them. And it's draw 2 cards and discard 1 or more cards. Reduce the next damage dealt by Haka by 2 for each card discarded this way. Now, I have mixed thoughts on this Haka. It is a little bit more cost efficient in that it doubles. So if you discard 3 cards, for instance, you reduce 6 damage. So it is very cost efficient in cards. But it's only for the next damage dealt to Haka. So, unlike, say, the ground pound ability, which completely stops damage from being dealt to Haka and the entire team for an entire turn, and you only have to discard 2 cards for that, this is only for the next instance of damage. So if you're dealing with... So if there's environment cards in play, or you're dealing with a villain target that does more than 1 instance of damage, or you're dealing with, if there's multiple villain targets in play, it kind of becomes not that useful. If it shielded him for an entire turn until the next turn, then it would be a lot better. But unfortunately, hang on, I'll be back. Alright, back. Okay, so because it's not only for the next damage dealt to Haka, I don't generally use this. I generally discard it. But if you are expecting to take a lot of damage, or a single instance of a lot of damage, then it might be worth it as opposed to having to heal it, because it's more cost efficient with cards. Like, because it doubles the amount. So if you play, say, 1 card, it reduces it by 2. Because it's very card efficient, there are times when it's more useful to shield damage than it is to restore it. But most of the time I don't bother with this card. I just use it to discard. The next one is one of his equipment cards. He's got 2 called Mir. I don't know what the pronunciation of it is. It probably refers to some sort of Maori club based on the drawing. It's an equipment. It's limited. You can only have one. You can only have 1 card in play. You can only have 1 of it in play. It's a power, and Haka deals 1 target 2 melee damage, and you draw a card. All right. Now, normally, you're sort of vying for... There's this equipment card, and then there's the other one called Tahaya, which does 3 melee damage to 2 targets. So, you sort of got to... Because Haka can only use 1 power a turn, you sort of got to pick whether or not you want to do 2 damage and draw an extra card, or you want to do 2 damage... Or you want to do 3 melee damage to 2 targets. But normally, you've got that option. But just to keep in mind, if Haka has 3 Dominion cards in play, right, and he destroys one, and 1 environment card gets destroyed while he's playing, and you use Mir, that means by the end of his turn, he'll have drawn 5 cards in a single turn. So, keep in mind that sometimes this is a better card to use than the other one. I mean, especially if there's only 1 villain target. I mean, you might be doing 1 less damage, but you're drawing an extra card, which is going to help you with either healing or doing more damage, or using it for the ground and pound ability. But it is one of his 2 equipment cards. The next one is Punish the Weak. It's an ongoing limited. So the way that it works is whenever Haka would deal damage to the non-hero target with the lowest HP, increase that damage by 1. Whenever Haka would deal damage to any other target, reduce that damage by 1. And it has a power that allows you to destroy the card if you don't want it in play. Now, I'm a little bit mixed on this one. There are times when it is really useful. But if there's multiple villain cards in the deck, if you're playing with a villain who uses multiple targets, if you're playing with a villain who has no targets, then it's useful because it's like it's an extra 1 damage to the villain. Assuming there aren't any environment targets in play. But if you're playing with a villain that has multiple targets, it might limit your ability to who you want to target. So this one is, you sort of got to decide when to play it. It's called Punish the Weak. And like I said, it reduces damage. It increases the damage when you attack the target with the lowest HP, the non-hero target with the lowest HP, and it reduces damage by 1 whenever you attack any other target. So you got to keep in mind when you want to play this or not. This other one is an interesting one called Savage Mana. Now, the reason it's interesting is it's an ongoing, it's limited, and the way it works is whenever Haka destroys a target, you may put that card beneath this card. And then it gives him a power, which is destroy all cards beneath this card. Haka deals 1 target X toxic damage, where X is the number of cards destroyed this way times 2. Now, this is a useful ability for a few reasons. One, Haka is going to be doing damage. That's primarily what he does. So, he's probably going to be filling it up. But sometimes, and the other advantage is because it's toxic damage, it means that it's another damage type, which means if you're fighting against a villain target that's immune to melee damage, which is primarily what Haka deals. This is another damage type to keep in mind. Very, very useful card, but there's some other variants where I have used this card before against characters, like to make sure that because you can actually put cards underneath it, sometimes you might want to keep a card underneath it so it doesn't end up in the trash. But I'll get into that at some other point, like against certain villains, because I have beaten certain villains this way. I've shut them down with this card. But essentially, for now, it just allows you to deal more damage. The next card is his other... Oh, wait, we skipped a card. Now, he's got 2 of these in his deck, and it's called Rampage. This card is a really, really awesome card. It's really, really good for clearing out, for dealing with villains that have a lot of targets in play. And in actual fact, you shouldn't play this card if you're playing against a villain that likes to put a lot of targets in play. You should keep this card in your hand as an insurance policy. So the way it works is it's called Rampage. It's a one-shot. Haka deals each non-hero target 5 melee damage, and each hero target 2 melee damage. Now you might say, oh, but I don't want to deal 2 melee damage to each of my heroes. Yes, but if this card clears the board of villain targets, you could potentially be saving yourself a lot more damage than you would have to taking that 2 damage. And if you can play 2 of them in a single turn, that's 10 damage total across all targets, which I'll get into later into one of the variants. But keep this card in your hand for making sure that, because it's non-hero targets, even the environment deck. So if there's lots of villain targets in play, if there's lots of targets in play, and you need to get rid of them, you play this card. Now, the next one is his equipment card that I alluded to before. Tayaha, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a equipment limited, and it's a power. Deals up to 2 targets 3 melee damage each. Not much to say. Obviously, if you don't want to be drawing extra cards, or there's multiple targets in play, it might be better to use this one instead of the mirror. But yeah, it's a straightforward damage card. Damage equipment card. Now you got Temoka or Tamoka. Reduce damage dealt to Haka by 1. Pretty decent. Obviously, it doesn't make him super... Oh, well, I can make him a little bit tanky. Because he can heal himself, like, a lot. But, yep, not much to say about this. It just reduces damage dealt to Haka by 1. Now, one advantage of this is not just that it reduces damage dealt to Haka by 1, but if there's any powers that give him the ability to damage himself to gain extra abilities, this card helps mitigate that damage. I will get to that in the next section when I'm talking about, like, who he plays well with. But it's pretty straightforward. Reduce damage dealt to Haka by 1. Then we've got the last card, which is Vitality Surge, which is a one-shot. And Haka regains 2 HP, draw a card. Pretty straightforward. It can be pretty useful. Like, especially because it lets you draw an extra card and heal at the same time, which Haka likes to do. Yep. So, this was part 1 of our discussion of Haka and all his cards and abilities. So, we're going to move on to part 2 now, where I show a gameplay of actually playing with Haka and how to play him, which I will link to in the podcast. So I'm not gonna put that video, the playthrough video on in a podcast, because it wouldn't make sense. You'd have to see it, but I'll link to it in the show notes. And then there'll be a part 3 after that, which will be discussion of variants and how he interacts with other people in the team. Alright, this was G-Man Gaming and Reviews, and we will be moving on to part 2. Thank you. Welcome to part 3 of our Sentinels of the Multiverse Haka guide. So this is the part where we're going to discuss variants and where Haka fits into a team. Now, where's the variants? I know why. Because I haven't unlocked them on... I'm used to playing this game on... So I'll just unlock them now. Okay. Now if we go back to the multiplayer. Cool, now we've got the variants. Now, this is... Haka's got a few variants. This one is the Haka of Knowledge. So essentially his power is he gets to draw a card. Now if he discards a card with Haka on it, now he may discard a card with Haka on it in the title, and if he does, he draws another 2 cards. So he potentially has the ability to draw 4 cards in a single turn. Right? This is an interesting variant. I haven't really played with it that much because it doesn't really interest me that much. But is an interesting variant on the regular Haka. This Haka can probably get to cards can probably get to his equipment cards a lot quicker. But yeah, I don't really have much to say on this Haka because he's like the others, he's pretty self-contained. He pretty much just helps him draw cards. He helps him draw a lot of cards, but he helps him draw cards. Alright, so then we've got the next variant. This one is my favorite. So this variant is Prime Warden's Haka. Not only does he have the most health of all the variants, he also has a power which allows him to play a card. Okay, which is good enough on its own, because being able to play an extra card in a turn is actually really, really good. Especially with Haka, because he's going to be drawing a lot of cards, so it allows him to get set up quicker. But also, the important bit, if he plays a card, if he uses his power to play a card with Haka in the title, he can select somebody else to gain the benefit of that card. So now, if you use this Haka, you can use this Haka card to heal other people. Or use this Haka card to increase the damage that somebody else deals, or use his Haka to shield. But being able to heal other people is really, really powerful. In fact, this is the variant of Haka that I use when I'm playing to win. Like when I'm playing against difficult... Like before I came across this variant, I didn't really use Haka that much. But this Haka is my favorite. Like giving him the ability to use the three Hakas to heal other people or to help them deal damage is really, really good. It makes him a lot more of a team support player than the other variants are. And then you got this last one that I haven't really played as either, called Extreme Prime Warden's Haka. His power is he selects a hero card, and until the start of the next turn, redirect damage that would be dealt to that target to Haka instead. So, and whenever he's dealt damage this way, he regains 1 health. So, this one gives him the ability to tank for one other character. Not sure how I like this. The reason being is he doesn't have... So, if you're going to play this, right, you would probably want to play him with other characters that give him the ability to use more powers a turn than his base power, right? The reason I say that is because if you're tanking for one character, that character better be doing a lot. Because you're essentially giving up his ability to deal damage so that he can tank. So I can see that there would be times when you would want to do this, especially because Haka has access to these Haka cards where he can heal himself. I can see when that would be useful. But generally with Haka, he wants to be doing damage, so not too sure about this variant. Like, I can see times when having a base power to tank for a particular character can be very good, especially if that character is either Omnitron X or Stuntman, because both of them benefit from people tanking for them. But yeah, apart from doing that, where he becomes more of a team support, I can't really see myself using this variant, but I will experiment with it. But yeah, so these are and you got the base power with the base variant where he does one target 2 melee damage. So where does Haka fit in a team? If you're using the base variant or the Eternal Haka, this character is primarily a damage dealer, but he also has the ability to heal himself and to do more damage. He can also tank damage for the environment, which in actual fact, if you combine that with Legacy, because Legacy can tank damage from villain cards. So if you actually play him with Legacy, you can use him to tank damage from the environment, okay? While Legacy tanks damage for the environment. Well, you can use him to tank damage for the environment, while Legacy tanks damage from villain targets. And if you combine that with Wraith and her mega computers to reduce the damage coming from environment targets, and combine it with this Tamoko, it means that you can pretty much be very, very well covered. You got him tanking the environment, and Legacy tanking the villain targets. The only problem with playing this card is that you have to redirect it. It's not a choice. So, Yeah, that's the variance. Now, if you're playing, like I said, if you're playing with any of the other variants, he's more of a damage dealer. Keep this Rampage card in your hand if you're dealing with a character who's got multiple targets. But the other variants are damage dealers. The Eternal Haka variant allows him to get to cards faster. So if you want him to get to his equipment cards or whatever, helps him get there quicker. But apart from that, once he's got the cards he wants in his hand, you're probably not going to be using the base power, because you're going to be wanting to deal damage essentially. That being said, I can see a use for this Eternal Haka if you combine him with Wraith's smoke bombs, where if you have him constantly healing himself, and then she's going to redirect damage to him. She's going to use smoke bombs to redirect damage to him, so he can help tank that way. Plus, it helps him get to his ground pound faster. So, yeah. But like I said, for the most part, he's very self-contained. He just does damage. And he can heal himself, but he essentially just does damage. That's what he does. He's all about doing damage. Alright? Except for, as I said, if you play with the Prime Warden's Haka, then he actually becomes a lot more of a team support. He can do more than just damage. He can actually heal the team or help them do more damage. So, like I said, this is my favorite variant, but so this is the variance. This is the end of the discussion essentially about like where Haka fits in, and how you play him. Like I said, he's one of the more simple characters, so you're not going to really see a lot of in-depth discussion in terms of like complexity, because he's not really that complex. So this was the end of our guide. So to finish up, he's a damage dealer primarily, but if you're playing with the Prime Warden's Haka, he's also team support in terms of healing, and he's a very good healer. Because most of the other characters that have powers that use healing really only have the ability to heal 1 or 2 damage. He actually can heal a lot more. So it actually makes him very, very useful. Plus, this variant has the highest health of all of them. So this was the end of the discussion on Haka and the variants and where he fits in a team. He's primarily a damage dealer. So if you need a damage dealer, take him. Alright, this was G-Man Gaming and Reviews. If you were listening to us on the podcast, please rate it 5. What do they call it? Please rate it 5 out of 5 if that's what you'd like to do. And if you're watching the YouTube series, please like and subscribe. Thank you. Goodbye.